Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You're here because you need to get smart, fast, and today we are tackling a really big, uncomfortable truth, one that AI is forcing right into the corporate spotlight.
And it is a deeply uncomfortable one for a lot of leaders because it's basically stripping away all plausible deniability.
Right.
For decades, organizations have been relying on data that was, well, essentially useless for actually preventing problems.
You mean things like annual turnover rates?
Exactly. Lagging indicators like turnover or exit interviews that land on someone's desk months too late to matter, or those, engagement surveys that are so heavily aggregated
That they hide all the real
that
problems.
obscure everything. And that old comfortable equilibrium, it's gone forever.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this idea that your company's retention problem, your engagement failures, all those talent bottlenecks, they might not be these big systemic HR failures at all.
No, not at all. They're often highly localized, really concentrated patterns, and they're almost always clustering around specific struggling managers.
We're going to look at the proof, the massive financial consequences, and really the ethical tightrope organizations now have to walk.
And we'll dig into how these modern machine learning systems can detect these subtle real-time patterns. It forces this really crucial binary choice on leadership.
Was a choice.
Are they going to use this powerful new data for, let's say, punitive policing to find and punish people? Or are they going to use it for genuine developmental coaching and growth? The tech is here, it's mature, the bottleneck is the organizational culture.
Okay, let's unpack that transformation. It really sounds like a quantum leap. If the old system was like driving a car using only the rearview mirror, what is this new AI intelligence actually detecting in real time?
Well, the huge difference is in integrating all these diverse data streams. Traditional feedback was always delayed, it was subjective.
And people could game it.
Totally.
Right.
But these modern systems, they look for behavioral signals across the whole digital landscape.
So what are we talking about? What kinds of signals?
We're talking about subtle patterns. Things like how often employees are engaging with the company's learning management system, or are they applying for internal jobs? It even looks at changes in peer networks. Is someone suddenly becoming isolated? And the big one, communication sentiment analysis.
Okay, communication sentiment analysis. That sounds very close to surveillance. Can you get more specific? What micro signals is the AI looking for that really show an employee's, checked out?
It's a key distinction. It's not reading the content of your conversations. It's not about what you're saying. It's about looking for changes in observable patterns and frequency.
For example.
So, for example, a sudden or a sustained change in calendar patterns that signals withdrawal. A high performer who suddenly stops accepting optional meetings or cancels all their non-essential one-on-ones.
I see.
It's looking for that kind of engagement decline across multiple signals at the same time.
And you mentioned in the sources that the key differentiator is precision. These systems aren't just predicting general turnover. They can spot retention risks months before someone actually resigns. But how does the AI know it's the manager and not some other factor?
And that is the real analytic breakthrough. It transforms retention from this, abstract organizational metric.
Something you see on an HR dashboard.
Right, into a quantifiable, actual managerial performance indicator. And it does this by what we call controlling for confounding variables.
Okay, hold on. Let's stop right there. That sounds a little academic.
Fair enough.
Break that down for us. What does controlling for confounding variables actually mean in practice?
Right. Okay, so imagine you have two call centers. They're in the same city, high cost of living, competing for the exact same talent pool.
Okay.
Now, if both of those centers experience high turnover, that's probably a market issue, right? A compensation problem.
That's the confounding variable.
Exactly. The AI controls for that. But if manager A in one center loses 50% of their team every year, and manager B in the same center doing the same job only loses 10%.
Then it's not the market.
It's not the market. The AI can essentially rule out that market pressure and isolate the one variable that remains, manager A's specific localized behavior.
Wow. Okay, so that makes the data actionable in a way an aggregate report never could be. So why now? What pushed this kind of sophisticated tech into the mainstream?
We saw three major drivers kind of converge all at once. First, the huge shift to remote work during the pandemic. It just wiped out all those informal observational cues.
You mean like the manager walking by a desk and just sensing something's off?
Precisely, that management by walking around, grabbing a coffee, having a quick chat, all of that was gone. So organizations suddenly needed a systematic digital way to replace those lost human senses.
And the second driver? I'm guessing generative AI has a role to play.
A huge role. Gen AI enables this really sophisticated natural language analysis at scale. It can detect indicators of psychological safety, for example, which used to require a person to manually code thousands of text samples.
And now a machine can do it instantly.
In hours, not months. It can flag things like patterns of conversational dominance in meetings, or if a team is avoiding talking about risks.
And the third piece has to be the money.
Absolutely. The competitive pressure for talent has just elevated retention to a board-level strategic priority. C-suites are now sponsoring these expensive analytics investments because the financial stakes are just too high to ignore.
And we really need to talk about those stakes. We're not talking about small amounts of money here. What is the real ugly price tag when an organization lets a struggling manager just stay in their role?
The business case is genuinely shocking. Research consistently suggests that replacing just one employee costs, conservatively, somewhere between 1/2 to 2 times their annual salary.
And that's accounting for recruitment, onboarding, lost productivity.
Everything. The whole cost. So if you have a manager overseeing, say, a team of 12, and they have 40% turnover every year,
Even if the company average looks okay.
that one manager is just hemorrhaging cash and value for the organization.
And that must has cascading effects, right? It's not just the people who leave.
Exactly. It creates these devastating ripple effects. Your high-performing employees, they're not clueless. They see these pockets of dysfunction.
And they stay away.
They strategically adjust their internal mobility plans to avoid those teams like the plague.
It's almost like a talent gravity whale.
That is a perfect analogy. It really is. The great managers attract and hold on to the best talent. They get the best internal transfers, while the struggling managers who are already losing people get what's left over.
Which creates this self-reinforcing cycle.
A quality divergence where the performance gap just gets wider and wider over time.
And beyond the dollars and cents, there's the human cost. The erosion of psychological safety. We've seen so much research linking bad management directly to stress and burnout.
The link is undeniable. We have measurable data showing that employees under ineffective managers suffer. It leads to increased stress, burnout, lower job satisfaction, and even physical health consequences.
And when the data makes it obvious that this is happening and the organization does nothing, that must feel like a betrayal.
A profound one. And innovation just dies on the vine in those environments.
Of course. Why would you risk a new idea or point out a flaw in a process if you're worried your manager is going to blame you?
You wouldn't. Teams with high turnover or low trust just stop taking risks. They stop sharing knowledge.
They adopt, as the sources say, defensive postures.
They just hunker down to protect themselves. But maybe the most corrosive thing is when this AI makes it visible that your career depends more on the lottery of which manager you get.
That on your own merit.
It just shatters the psychological contract that employees have about fair treatment. The whole system is exposed as being unfair.
So we have this incredibly powerful, revealing technology. It unmasks failure. And this forces that critical choice you mentioned earlier. Do you use this data to punish, or do you use it to develop? That's the crossroads.
And that choice defines the entire culture of the organization. The ones that treat this new visibility as a developmental opportunity, not a punitive tool, they're the ones seeing sustainable improvements.
Because it all comes down to intent.
Exactly. A manager's willingness to accept feedback depends entirely on whether they perceive the intent as helpful and forward-looking or just judgmental.
So how do the leading organizations actually do this? How do they embed these AI insights into coaching without it feeling like Big Brother is watching?
They use what we can call transparent diagnostic coaching systems, and they're designed to avoid individual surveillance completely.
What does that look like in practice?
It means they provide confidential manager dashboards that show aggregated team-level patterns, not specific employee behaviors. So a dashboard might flag that a team has statistically elevated after-hours email activity compared to peer teams.
But it won't say, Jane Smith sent 50 emails after 9 p.m.
Never. That's the red line. It's about patterns, not people. The data points can't identify specific individuals.
That distinction, aggregated patterns versus individual tracking, that has to be the key to building trust. But you don't just hand a manager this complex data and say, Good luck.
No, absolutely not. They need interpretation support. A good coach in this scenario is like an air traffic controller, not a police officer.
I like that.
They're there to help the pilot see the weather patterns they might have missed so they can land the plane safely. Managers get support from trained human coaches, not just a self-service analytics platform. And that guides them to analyze the root cause instead of just getting defensive.
And this kind of objective visibility must also highlight common skill gaps that cause these retention problems in the first place. What are some of the specific behaviors AI systems consistently pinpoint in struggling managers?
A primary one is a failure to create psychological safety. We consistently see managers with retention problems showing patterns like very limited open discussion time in meetings, or they shut down ideas too quickly.
Multi-attribution.
A lot of blame attribution during setbacks. The AI can detect this by analyzing conversational volume and even the emotional tone of team interactions.
So the development programs can't just be some generic be a better leader seminar.
They have to be targeted. You have to teach specific, measurable micro behaviors.
For instance,
If a manager scores low on psychological safety, the program should teach them things like structured turn-taking in meetings or how to ask generative, open-ended questions before they jump to a solution. Another common one is a gap in development planning. If you see low employee satisfaction with career growth and fewer people getting promoted off that team.
that points directly to a manager who isn't skilled at having those career conversations.
Precisely.
Okay, but if we're going to hold managers accountable with data this precise, we have to talk about fairness. The process has to feel just, or the whole system collapses under distrust and, people just gaming the metrics.
Procedural justice is paramount. It's absolutely non-negotiable. And it requires 4 foundational elements. First, you have to give adequate notice of the measurement standards. Managers have to know beforehand what patterns and metrics they're being measured against. No surprises.
And second, I assume, is the quality of the data itself.
Correct. Evidence quality assurance. The organization has to prove it's ruled out algorithmic bias or weird confounding variables.
And a manager should be able to challenge it.
They must be able to. If a manager can show their high turnover was because a specific temporary project ended that the algorithm missed, the system has to account for that.
Which leads right to the third and maybe most critical element.
Yeah.
The manager has to have a voice.
A voice and an explanation opportunity. It's essential. They need to be able to provide context to challenge the interpretation. And this isn't just a formality. It dramatically increases their willingness to actually engage with the feedback.
And the fourth element of justice.
Consistency. The standards have to apply across the board to everyone.
So if a middle manager is facing this level of scrutiny, the senior leaders have to face the same thing for their own teams.
Absolutely. It demonstrates organizational equity.
So how should accountability be tiered to avoid that immediate punitive reaction we're trying to prevent?
It has to be gradual. The initial focus is always on coaching, on capability building, with clear, monitored metrics for improvement. It's only the managers who show sustained, provable underperformance despite getting all that targeted support and coaching. They're the ones who might eventually face employment consequences.
Development first, termination last.
Always.
What about the data itself? We have to touch on governance. What principles do you need to protect employee privacy but still get utility for the manager?
2 principles are absolutely essential to build trust: data minimization and algorithmic transparency, or, as it's often called, explainable AI.
Data minimization seems straightforward.
It is. It just means you only collect the data that is demonstrably relevant to predicting retention. You resist the urge to analyze everything just because you can.
And algorithmic transparency or explainable AI? That seems critical for the development piece. A manager can't fix an opaque, bad manager score.
They can't. They need access to explanations that show which specific behaviors influence their assessment. They need to see that the issue isn't just you have a high-risk score, but that the system flagged low one-on-one frequency or slow response times to their team.
So it turns an abstract score into concrete, actionable things they can work on.
That's the goal. It becomes their developmental priority list.
This level of transparency and personalized insight, it leads to a really fascinating conclusion: the democratization of leadership development.
Yes. Historically, leadership development was for the chosen few, these expensive, high-potential programs.
Chosen by opaque processes.
Right. But AI allows for what we could call distributed leadership development. It helps organizations finally realize that improving the median manager, not just the top 10%, is what provides the most substantial benefit to the entire company.
So instead of generic training for everyone, AI can create customized learning pathways that are aligned directly to the specific behavioral gaps it identifies for all managers.
Exactly. A manager with a psychological safety gap gets coaching on that. One struggling with career development gets training in that. This democratized, targeted approach is really the only way organizations can achieve superior management capability at scale.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you, the listener? The core conflict seems to be that this technology is here. It's operational. And leaders have to choose between that punitive approach, which just produces defensiveness and gaming the system, or a developmental approach, which leads to real learning.
And making that choice requires significant cultural courage. Leaders have to shift to what we call a learning orientation. They have to model vulnerability themselves and frame this AI measurement as a tool to support excellence, not just enforce minimums.
Because the bar for what it means to be an effective manager is just permanently rising as AI makes all these previously hidden patterns visible.
The organizations that get this right will build their competitive advantage not on the tech alone, but on having superior management capability system-wide.
So the ultimate question for you to think about is this. Does your organization view this new, powerful transparency as a tool to judge its leaders, or as a resource to genuinely develop them?